GWI a couple weeks ago sent out a graph comparing water stocks as compared to the broader S&P 500, and the learning there was that the water industry is fairly non-correlated to the broader market, right? Because water is irreplaceable, it is essential, and so I think what we have found over these past 4 months is though even though there is a relatively there's a lot of uncertainty in the broader market, the water industry is fairly stable and essential.
Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan. I'm the editorial director for the Endeavor Business Media Water Group. I am joined today by Michael Warady. He's president and co-founder of the Sylmar Group. We're going to be talking about some of the business environment in the water and wastewater market this year in 2025 and how he's trying to approach things from a strategic and tactical point of view and just some of the challenges and tailwinds that he's experiencing for his business. So thank you so much for being here, Michael. We appreciate your time and energy.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah. So it was a while back on LinkedIn, you had shared that 2025 has been relatively turbulent. I would imagine most people would agree. It's been like a roller coaster of ups and downs and actions that have been actions and then rescindance of those actions. And things are really like volatile, it seems like, across all business markets, not just water, wastewater. When it comes to your business, what have you been feeling? What are some of the impacts that you have felt in 2025? And how are you trying to position your business to be most effective during a time that is, as I've noted, kind of turbulent?
Yeah, it's a great question. 2025 has definitely thrown us some curveballs, but I think one of the greatest learnings or findings over the past 4 months has been how relatively stable the water market has been, especially as it relates to the rest of the economy and kind of the global industry. I think GWI a couple weeks ago sent out a graph comparing water stocks as compared to the broader S&P 500, and the learning there was that the water industry is fairly non-correlated to the broader market, right? Because water is irreplaceable, it is essential. And so I think what we have found over these past 4 months is though even though there is a relatively there's a lot of uncertainty in the broader market, the water industry is fairly stable and essential. And so, what we found is that obviously supply chains that a lot of our companies, both at Sylmar Group and elsewhere, there's just a lot of unknowns right now. With the tariffs changing, being modified, being rescinded, and now this 90-day extension, we are finding that a lot of the global supply chain that we started to build and refine in 2022 is still relatively resilient. But a lot of our vendors that are from, say, China, Canada, Mexico, and the United States have told us that they can't really give us a lot of insight into what 120 days or 180 days from now might look like. And then to kind of pair both the supply chain dynamics along with some other kind of macroeconomic dynamics of there's a lot of retirees in the water industry that are kind of phasing out right now across
Mhm.
the water industry, what we call the silver tsunami of sorts. And so I think what we're seeing is a lot of kind of macroeconomic trends hitting at the same time, while the water industry remains incredibly essential to agriculture industry, residential, commercial industry within America. And so, really, for the Sylmar Group, what we're finding is that this is creating a lot of work for us, but it's also creating opportunities for us because what we're finding is that clients are not right now looking for the cheapest option. They're looking for the most stable option. They're looking for people that are kind of truly dedicated to solving their problems. And so, what we are continuing to invest in is into people, into technologies that are creating differentiation. And just like we saw in 2022, just like we saw in 2008, we anticipate that over the coming year, things will begin to settle down across industry, both municipal and industrial economies, and our companies are prepared to kind of go with the flow there.
Mhm. Yeah. So earlier this year, there was a LinkedIn post that you had made, and you kind of talked about this weird planning paradox of like it's like, oh, you want to plan for things, but then you don't know if they're gonna stay for the long term. So it's like, how much do you invest in it? How long do you plan for it? Could you elaborate a little bit more on kind of like the challenges that poses, and like how are you trying to navigate planning right now as like regulations are uh, potentially on the chopping block or are being rolled back and things like that. I imagine that presents a lot of weird complexities that you have to deal with on a regular basis right now.
Sure. Yeah, so Sylmar, we have kind of two primary divisions, right? And one of our divisions is more focused on municipal water. It's a firm called General Pump Company that does primarily groundwater well and pump maintenance. And the other side of the business is primarily industrial commercial, and that's a firm called EAI Water that's doing industrial water treatment for heating and cooling applications. And so regulations across municipal and industrial applications are remarkably different, right? And
Hmm.
so I saw the other day there was an article about the PFAS rule that was passed in 2024 by the EPA, and how there is the likelihood, if not the certainty, that that will be narrowed down probably just to PFOS and PFOA, which is what the first Trump administration had kind of settled on. And so right now, the uncertainty around where do PFAS regulations go, I think,
Hmm.
is driving a lot of decisions that new technology companies are making, but also that a lot of municipalities are looking at, in terms of where do we invest and when.
Hmm.
Because as most people who are watching this will know, PFAS remediation is incredibly expensive for the 66,000, I believe, utilities or water systems that would be regulated under this rule. And so this planning paradox, well, and I'll say on the industrial side, a lot of the regulations and ordinances that are driving innovation in that side are primarily state and local, right? And that creates a planning paradox about, if you live in Kansas City, Kansas versus Kansas City, Missouri, you might be running off of different regulations.
Hmm.
And so I think what we're finding is, the recession, or removal of regulations, is a little bit less of an interesting dynamic than if there are regulations on the books, but there aren't people to enforce them. And so I
Hmm.
think that's the thing that is creating the greatest paradox across the industry right now is if you're making decisions based off of regulations and based off of enforcement of regulations, then you have to believe that those regulations are going to be enforced. And I think there is a general unknown right now across the industry of what is most important and where should investments be made in order to make sure that this is a kind of a long-term minded investment. And so I think what we have done across our business is, gone across essentially on listening tours with a lot of our clients, what they're thinking about, what their managers are thinking about, what their owners are thinking about, and really focus on being operational and kind of operational outcome minded, as opposed to playing kind of a guessing game, because regulations without enforcement are really just suggestions. But
Hmm.
our partners, our clients, they need more than suggestions. They need to make sure that their equipment is safe, that their people are safe, and so that's really allowed us to view this planning paradox on one side, but then also to focus on what are client outcomes that they need on the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned kind of the resilience of the water market here. It sounds like, despite some of the headwinds that are out there, you seem to remain quite optimistic about things. Like, what has you optimistic about 2025? Are there some tailwinds that you feel like you can capture in the sails, so to speak, and kind of ride through the year? And what's contributing to your optimism about the water market in 2025? I mean, beyond just the resilience that you're experiencing so far.
Yeah, I think the water industry is a unique beast that I'm obviously very passionate about, right?
Hmm.
Our teams wake up early to go solve water problems, and in my opinion, there's nothing else more important on earth. And so I think what the optimism and the passion that comes from it is saying that, regardless what happens in the broader economy, not to say that that's not important, but that the water industry is still such a key component and variable of all industry, of all agriculture, of all residential life in the United States. And investment is continuing to be made in that. And that lack of correlation to the broader economy, to me, makes me believe that the water industry is only going to become more important as people begin to realize how a lot of the water, whether it's priced correctly or not, but getting clean water of a sufficient quantity to the location it's needed is not going to change at any time this year.
Hmm.
And so, if anything, what we've seen, with the GWI report last week, or what we're seeing in terms of water utility stocks, or frankly, where we're seeing a lot of investment continuing to be made via, the Infrastructure Act,
Hmm.
is water. It used to be this kind of niche concern, but I think now it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, for lack of a better word, right? And
Hmm.
consumers are realizing that, CEOs are worrying about and thinking about that. And so a lot of that investment that has been made into people, into infrastructure, into technology over the last few years, I think is only going to become more important over the next few years with the uncertainty that's going on. And so I think there has been just a general flight to safety and flight to quality across the water industry that I think will only continue to refine over the coming years.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any other closing thoughts or the things that we didn't touch on in this conversation that you wanted to bring to the table and kind of share with the broader market as a whole?
I think the thing that I'm continuing to tell our employees and the people that I work with and our customers is just to remember how important the water industry is to the broader economy. And I think for the folks that are listening to this, interested in getting into the water industry or figuring out should they stay in the water industry, um, to me, this is the one irreplaceable resource on earth. And there are a lot of ways to make money in this world. There's a lot of ways to make a difference in the world. But I think the uncertainty of 2025 thus far has only kind of further solidified my belief in that what we're doing day in day out is the most important work on earth. So thank you to everyone out there that continues to kind of fight the battles both on municipal and on industrial side. And I hope everyone is as optimistic as I am about the coming years.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The water industry must have some of the greatest job security that's out there. As long as you're not doing something illegal, you're probably in it for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think I was talking about this with my wife the other day, right? And just in terms of how this is a true career, right? The
Mhm.
water industry doesn't create jobs; it creates careers, and oftentimes it takes a decade or two to be a true master of the craft. And so I think for the folks coming out of school or thinking about this in early days about should I become a municipal water operator and why what kind of both stability does that provide me, but also an opportunity to grow in a role. I think this is a really unique and special place to kind of work day in, day out. And so I'm feeling very fortunate to be here as myself.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Michael. We appreciate your time. And for everyone who's watching, you can check out our video description below to learn a little bit more about what's going on right now in the marketplace. We have some survey results that we just recently posted about attitudes toward the Trump administration, how utilities and engineers and whatnot feel about things, with some anonymized quotes in there as well. So definitely check that out. And once again to you, Michael, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It was a lot of fun.